Namaste, I am Dr. K S Varaprasad, former Director, Indian Institute of Oilseed Research and ICR Institute, currently working as an advisor to Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institutes, Thailand, Indo-German Global Academy for Agroecology Research and Learning, and WASAN. Today, I will be talking about the indigenous seed systems and systemic revival. There is a felt need of systemic revival and mainstreaming of the indigenous seeds, and hence the topic talks about the indigenous seed systems and their revival to mainstream the seeds. You can see that indigenous seeds is one of the main components of natural farming. The reason is that the package of practices will vary with the chemical farming versus natural farming. Indigenous seeds are used to the nature-based package of practices. Seed, as all of you know, it's the one which gives rise to the plant, and it's made out of the 5 natural elements, and it gives good yields in the ecosystem from where they originated. They have the capacity to resist or give climate resilience to the drought, etc., and also to pests. The indigenous seeds have different names. For example, people call them as traditional varieties, farmer varieties, ethnic varieties, tribal varieties. Varieties of common knowledge is also another category that is used for these indigenous seeds, and also community varieties. Ecotypes means suited to particular ecosystem. The land races where they evolved by themselves, and the wild types which are still not cultivated but they are harvested. All these could be the group of indigenous seeds. And when we are referring to the indigenous seeds in this context of natural farming, they are selected by the farmer and cultivated for a long time, maybe hundreds of years, in their pristine habitats. They are evolved based on the ecological suitability, farmer and consumer needs, and probably the animals associated with the farm. Their needs are also considered. And farmer interventions are based on their preferences and needs. Their field performance is often expressed in their adapted ecosystem. That means when you take them out of that ecosystem, their performance may be much lower or underperformance will be seen. Hence, when we talk of indigenous, that means they are locally suited only for that locality or for that ecosystem. They respond positively to location-specific traditional nature-based package of practices, as we already discussed. Then sometimes if you put chemical inputs to the indigenous seeds, their yield may become less as well. So which means the chemical fertilizers and the green revolution based technologies may not be suitable to indigenous seeds often. They are evolved, co-evolved harmoniously. It means there are the wild types, wild relatives are surrounding, local biodiversity is there, and also the soil in which they are grown. There is a linkage between the microbes of that soil and the plant growth or the indigenous seeds, and sometimes the microbes are associated with the seeds as well. So the seed microbiome, soil microbiome, ecosystem microbiome are linked to the indigenous seeds performance. And if you see, there are different variety of names that we have seen earlier. Some differences between them I will try to explain. The indigenous seeds or the native seeds or the ecosystem specific seeds, they are selected by the nature over hundreds of years. Of course, local variety, you can also call it as a farmer variety, which is actually legally defined by the PPFRA, and these farmer varieties have to be passed through the dust testing, distinctiveness, uniformity and stability, and then only they will be recognized as farmer variety by the plant variety authority. Land races, no formal breeder intervention. They are continuously grown by farmers over years, and sometimes not even cultivated there in the wild they are also, but they collect that and use it for food and other purposes, then also it can be called as a landrace. The high-yielding varieties are the ones which is in the modern agricultural science, you develop them by crossing or several other breeding principles and breeding methods. So these these are also called as improved varieties or modern varieties. They follow the principles of genetics, they stabilize and then release them, and this intervention is mainly from the breeder's perspective. Then the hybrid seeds and genetically modified seeds, these you can use only once, and when you want to go for next season, you have to buy them again or you have to access them again. The hybrid seeds are crossing of genetically distant parents. Only F1 seed can be used for growing, and similarly genetically modified seeds also only one time you can grow. The seed coming out of it will not be suitable for sowing again. And in case of the GMOs, not only the plant genes, there can be other genes which can be inserted into these varieties, and hence their package of practices will be completely different, unlike the indigenous varieties. And if you see what are the desirable features of these indigenous seeds, one of the main things the communities recognize is the cultural significance. Their festivals, their way of living, their health needs and their culture, they are linked to the seeds. So there are also regional preferences. There is nothing like that you can choose the variety based on the high yield. The purpose of these indigenous seeds is the basic needs of the farmers, animals and other ecosystem needs are taken care, and then they select it based on that, and then sometimes they may like a particular taste, that also could be a reason, sometimes the flavor. And then you can see in some of these points that I have written, there is a link, that means additional information can be obtained from the link. And then you have the other most important thing for indigenous seeds is the nutrient density. So in the race towards higher yields, higher and higher yields, we have ignored sometimes the nutrient density. Consequently, if you see that in the improved varieties compared with the indigenous varieties, they have a less zinc, iron, magnesium and several other elements, and then even the protein is also less and the minerals are also less in the improved varieties compared to the indigenous varieties. Then they also have inherent capacity or the climate resilience. The example is the rice seeds of Odisha. They have evolved to survive floods to the extent that when the flood level increases, the stem length also in competition with the flood it will increase. Very quickly it increases and escapes the damaging flood and survives. Many of the indigenous varieties have this trait based on the circumstances or ecosystem where they are growing. For example, Thailand rice land races have resistance to gall midge, and you can get more details about each of these things. Now let us see some of the indigenous seeds or land races of different crops and different ecosystems. For instance, if you see the paddy land races that are grown in high altitude areas, most of the times even the indigenous rice land races have a specific flavor which actually is preferred by the communities which grow these varieties. And it's not just flavor alone, the taste and also the color. You have the black rice, you have the red rice and you have brown rice, and based on the preference and also the requirement of the vitamins and minerals and other elements that are present in these indigenous seeds, they are valued and they are cultivated. If you see for indigenous varieties, it's a different channel of making them available in the current seed systems. One channel is formal varieties. You have the Central Variety Release Committee and State Variety Release Committee. Whereas indigenous varieties, since they are traditional, naturally occurring, and cultivated for several hundreds of years, they cannot be released again. So you have two channels now. Currently, one channel is Protection of Plant Varieties and Farmers' Right Act, that gives the provision that you can submit any farmer variety or indigenous variety to this authority, Plant Variety Authority. They follow certain procedures, they test in the different centers, and then if it withstands the distinctiveness, the uniformity and the stability over seasons, then that is recognized and a certificate is given, and the ownership will be given to the community which submits this particular application. And that's how the indigenous seed by name for multiplication and for bringing into the seed supply chain, it is one way that is possible. Now in the recent past, there is also another channel, agriculture being a state subject. Some of the state like Odisha has taken a lead, and they say that mainstreaming of land races based on the certain procedures that they follow and certain committees they constitute, it can be mainstreamed, which we will discuss a little later. But in addition to these two channels, there is also a soft channel, that is with the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources. So with the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, you can register some of these indigenous varieties. One way is to take a indigenous collection number. That's also a documentation in the National Gene Bank. The second way with NBPGR, or National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, is that you test this variety and come out with at least one trait that is different from the existing varieties, and that's a specific trait to that. Then you can release them as a registered indigenous variety, and it can also be cultivated, but the protection is not a legal protection like that of PPFRA. So for example, in case of paddy, Maruteru Sannalu is an indigenous variety grown in that area of Andhra Pradesh, and then that's a very fine grain variety with a specific flavor, and that's now is available for cultivation through multiplication by the university. Similarly, we have chickpea, lot of variability. Dolichos beans, we have the Ghana Chekudu, and then in pigeon pea, there is one variety in Adilabad of Telangana district, we find that there is one local variety called Erramacha Kandi. It looks like a castor seed, but it has got a wonderful protein richness, and also drought resistance or climate resilience is there, and that's also registered with NBPGR. And in sorghum, popped corn, popped sorghum is also possible. There is a specific variety which is called Pelalazona, which is also registered with the NBPGR. Then we have a green gram, which is yellow in color. It's not green, it is yellow in color, and it has a specific protein which serves the lactating mothers. So you see, the indigenous communities are so wise, and then they are so specific in their evaluation. This variety is named as Balintha Pesulu, which means the green gram that should be fed to the lactating mothers. Then we have a coriander variety, which is also registered as Sudha. You have Adlong bean, and in brinjal you have a large number of indigenous varieties. Almost around 1200 indigenous varieties or collections are available with the NBPGR, and they are also called as indigenous varieties. The types of seed selection. When you go, as I told you, in the formal breeding, you have the lot of breeding methods available. There are many new methods of breeding are also available, but in general, in the seed selection is part of the indigenous seeds as well, and then the farmers tend to choose the seeds that they perform. So you have a large population, and as a breeder also you can stabilize and select the individuals with a specific set of traits, and they can be called as a stabilized population, which can be used as a landrace or indigenous variety. Similarly, for breeding purpose, there is also a method of directional selection. So mostly it is preferred that indigenous varieties, based on the community information that we get, we keep those traits and see what population we should keep it to maintain that diversity as well as the principal traits of that particular variety, and then that should be used. Any off type coming beyond these boundaries of the traits that described by the communities, that can be taken off. But it is also possible some of these indigenous varieties with methods of stabilizing, directional or disruptive selection, they can be selected and then cultivated in particular ecosystems. Indigenous seeds conservation, why do we need to conserve the seeds? You see, in the when we got the freedom, then there was a problem of food security. Then there was a need also for the very high yield to feed the population of the entire country, and hence we brought out several new varieties, several technologies of package of practices that increases the yield and serves as a food security for the country. So in that direction, when we see one example of paddy, if you take, it's cultivated more than 40 million hectares in India, and there are several indigenous varieties prior to 1930s. It is estimated even only in Chhattisgarh alone around 20,000 varieties are cultivated, and throughout India more than 40,000 varieties are available, and the documentation for these 20,000 varieties is also available as indigenous seeds. And then from the 1960s to now, around 1100 varieties are hybrids, including hybrids. They are released formally through the national and state specific institutes in case of rice. Then out of these 1100 varieties, 30 released varieties cover more than 70% of the cultivated area. Then one of the varieties in paddy called BPT 4004, actually it's so popular, and it's a variety, improved variety that has come from Bapatla. That's how BPT is there. This covers almost 20% of the total paddy cultivated area, multiplied and distributed by several private industry also. So that's how we see that the 60,000 accessions of the paddy present in the National Gene Bank, 130,000 of the accessions present in the Irri, Philippines, 1100 varieties released in India, 30 varieties used to cover 70%, one variety coming to 20%. We have slowly reduced our indigenous seeds usage in the country, and now very little area is covered in the indigenous varieties, and that's the reason why we need to conserve this natural variability and then use it not only for improvement, but as such also there are varieties which are very useful. The traditional climate resilient cropping systems are well known in India, and now we have forgotten because for the need to bring the food security in India, we have adopted monocropping system, and we have tried to enhance the facilities of irrigation. We have tried to include chemicals for enhancing the yields, and slowly the indigenous cropping systems which are climate resilient are forgotten, and now there is a need now to bring them back. Every state where, particularly in the rain-fed areas, you have a specific systems of cultivation which are having a specific names and which are science-based, and they are location-specific cropping systems, and which if we bring it back will be very useful now. Examples are Hangdi Keti from Rajasthan, Rammol from Gujarat, Baradana Dhanya from Maharashtra, Akkadi Salu from Karnataka, and several others, Navadanya in Andhra Pradesh. There are several others specific to each ecosystem, and there is a method of sowing how to do that, and the time of sowing when to do that, based on the soil type, based on the rainfall, based on the sunshine, based on the season. There are specific package of practices which is a part of traditional knowledge existed in India. Those are the examples that I have given. There is a need to study them scientifically and bring them back. Now, how to these indigenous seeds, if we bring back, now the farmers have to buy seed from outside. if you have the if you empower the farmers so that they use their own seed, like the indigenous seed does not require to buy every year, whereas the improved seeds every 3 years, hybrid seeds every year or every season, GM seeds every season you have to buy. So if you really empower the farmers with the indigenous seeds, then the seed cost is almost nil, because it is their own produce. They select to keep them and use it for the next season. And in addition to that, it has a differential market. There is a specific advantage that some of them have the flavor and high nutritional content. They can get premium prices compared to a normal variety which you grow. Then also they have the ecological stewardship, like climate resilience. If you see Rajma varieties from Himalayas, they can withstand the natural frost that occurs in that zone. And there are certain soil health champions where in the huge terrain areas where a lot of slope is there, these millets, foxtail millet particularly, will prevent the soil erosion in the hilly terrains. So most of these crops have specific purpose based on the ecosystem and specific preference, and by empowering the farmers we get the advantage of popularizing the indigenous seeds. We have the continuation. If you see the community and knowledge sharing, and whatever that seed sovereignty is there, then the knowledge, you need not externally give the extension techniques for popularizing the package of practices, because they are all associated with the seed, and communities are well aware of those things. And you can see there is a falsa variety in Rajasthan where local knowledge is there, how to keep that. Then you have the seed banking and research NBPGR. Without losing their unique traits, you can keep them. Market access is possible by giving appropriate advertisement for the advantages of the nutrition or resilience to pests or the climate. Similarly, you have the policy support that comes out of the government schemes. Of course, now the NFNM is there, and PKVY. In these Paramparik Krishi Vikas Yojana, there is indigenous seed systems are encouraged, and the state governments are taking the advantage to popularize the indigenous seeds for the in the projects supported by the national government. Then if you see, there are seed exchange festivals that are held in the different parts of India, which also is indicative that seed is culturally integrated into our communities throughout India. It's not restricted to one region. The farmers and the communities and the tribals who cultivate the crops are well aware of the importance of the seed. If you sow the good seed, you will reap a good harvest. But it need not be that the same seed will perform same way in all the ecosystems. Is not correct. That's why they got a wrong notion that the indigenous varieties give low yield. No, it's not true. The indigenous varieties will yield equal or better than improved varieties in certain ecosystems where they evolved, because their genetic base is very broad. Their ability to withstand the climate and pests is very high. So their yielding ability is also very high in their original pristine habitats. Then native seed festival are in Chennai. Then you have also in the South India in general. You can see that there is also in West Bengal where paddy is cultivated in a larger way. They have a seed festival. And also Akshaya Tritiya. This is also a seed exchange festival in Uttarakhand. And if you see Sahajivana Seed Sammelan in Karnataka. So in Kerala also there is a indigenous seed festival organized by the State Biodiversity Board. So it's not only that the communities, but the State Biodiversity Boards are also taking lead in conducting these seed festivals, where the seed exchange happens and seed exhibition happens, and the people exchange their knowledge in addition to the seed. Then do we need really an alternative seed system for indigenous seeds? Because this topic also talks about revival, systemic revival of indigenous seed systems. So is it not the same seed system that we have for the improved varieties and hybrids? Will it not serve the same? No. There are certain difficulties in that. For example, if you take the traits of value are different. For example, in case of the improved varieties, you have the genetic purity, where it can be tested very easily either by specific traits in the field or by analysis, genetic analysis. So then in the formal seed system, when it only caters to the notified and released or registered varieties. That means for indigenous seeds, there is no separate seed system except that operates at the community level in a small areas, but there is no seed system approved by the governments, and that's why there is a need for alternative seed system which should ensure quality seed access, and it should mainstream the varieties, indigenous varieties, and there should be protocols for collection and evaluation. See, we cannot release or mainstream any variety which is called as indigenous variety. We should see whether that belongs to that ecosystem, it gives better yield and it gives better quality, better nutrition with resilience, then only it can be released. Then protocols for all components of the seed supply chain are also available. Then there is a release criteria cannot be the same as it in the case of the formal systems. For example, the evaluation in case of the indigenous varieties should be limited to few ecogeographic regions, sometimes a district, sometimes even part of the district where the ecosystem is different. Part of the districts may have irrigation, or it may be, part of it may be high altitude area, part of it may be plain. So it doesn't matter what is the political area, but the ecosystem or ecogeographic region where it occurs, where it originated, that's where the evaluation, limited evaluation should be done. And also farmers' field experiments should be considered. Then what will happen? Directly you are recording the yield in the farmers' fields where crop cutting experiments are conducted by the Department of Agriculture, and these yields record will be very helpful. The nutrition, the local preference, the cropping system, the resilience to climate and pests are also very important when we are evaluating indigenous seeds. Protocols for all the steps of seed system, including the seed multiplication, the pilot study and validation of all these protocols are done by the competent committees. The standard operating procedures for indigenous seed system is available and approved by the government of Odisha, which is now being emulated by other states as well. Then we have the following these principles. Last year, the committee from Odisha has released 4 finger millet land races as mainstreamed, and these names are in the finger millet: Bati Mandia, Kalia Mandia, and Bharati Mandia, Mami Mandia. They have also attached a village or culture name along with these finger millet varieties before they become popular, and seed production system is being worked out. In this Kharif, this seed will be produced of these released land races of the finger millet. Then we have the greens. Many people, when you go to any market, leafy vegetables, maximum 10, 12, 15 will be available. But you know, the India is so rich in diversity. We have 500 leafy green vegetables that can be eaten, and some of them or most of them are not even sown. They are collected and then you can eat them, either fresh or through cooking. So these kind of the local greens and the nourishing traditions have been documented earlier in Andhra Pradesh. About 57 local greens have been documented with all the description and methods of maintaining it and supplying it, where in Telangana also you have the Panaganti Kura, which is a very, very nutritious and very easily it grows. And the leaf greens are one of the main reasons for the anemia. Iron deficiency is coming because our food nowadays does not contain the leafy greens to the extent it is required. Then we have another community seed bank example I am giving, Sahaja Samruddha, which is owned by more than 500 farmers, seed farmers selected in Karnataka. They own this community seed bank. They maintain a lot of seed diversity. Most of the indigenous seeds are available, and it's now more than 10 years old, and they're very profitable venture, and they are able to supply hundreds of indigenous varieties across Karnataka and even across the states within India. So these indigenous varieties are maintained by these member farmers, and also they take benefit. So the community seed bank, if you want to study in detail, this is one good example successfully maintained in Karnataka. Then we have the indigenous seeds. It's not only community effort, sometimes individual farmers. They are not actually, I have given very few cases. You find few hundreds of individuals across India who maintain hundreds of varieties of the same crop. Example, paddy, or sometimes more than one crop. They maintain 200, 300 indigenous varieties because of their own interest, passion, and also commitment to the public to supply the best indigenous varieties. See, in 2004, Save Our Rice campaign started 1500 indigenous varieties, and then there is a paddy festival, and there are strategies of community seed bank for revival. And this is a legacy of Mr. Jayaraman, whom you can see in the photo, and this is also helpful in enhancing the health and nutrition. And the semi-polished and unpolished rice, it is well promoted with these indigenous varieties, which is a individual effort from Tamil Nadu. Then we have the other, how do we take it forward? Like the indigenous seeds, now you have seen that we have the importance of indigenous seeds, you know that, and there is a huge extent of diversity available in the country, and these indigenous seeds are losing, we are losing from the cultivation. Some of them are losing, or extinction is also happening for some of the varieties. So we need to really bring back this knowledge and also seeds. How it is possible? By not just collecting them and keeping in the gene banks with a number is one good method. I am not criticizing that. That good method will give a source for improvement of the varieties within that particular crop. But these are we are talking not about the accessions, but we are talking about the varieties, indigenous varieties. So these varieties can only be saved in a perfect way when we empower the farmers and give them the seed sovereignty. That means conservation through use. You actually cultivate, you use it, there is a demand for it, you get the one health for all the components of the health in the ecosystem, and also you get the nutritional benefit in addition to health, and also climate benefit, and has the climate resilience. And hence giving the seed sovereignty to the farmers is one of the best things which Government of India has certainly realized, and taking all the steps to make the indigenous varieties popular. Facilitate conservation bodies and then in situ conservation of local varieties, also through state biodiversity boards and biodiversity management committees which are formed under the National Biodiversity Authority, also should play a key role in promoting the indigenous varieties, which is being done. Investment policies are very, very important. The Government of India is doing all its efforts that the community seed banks be encouraged. It's not just one scheme, there are several schemes. Within the Ministry of Agriculture, the Protection of Plant Varieties Authority also is promoting community seed banks, Ministry of Agriculture directly, and many of the state governments. All of them they realize the importance of the indigenous seeds, and through community seed banks they are being popularized, but there is still a lot of scope that we can take forward by promoting these community seed banks. Then there could be ecosystem services. You know, when we use the indigenous seeds, the water requirement is less, the power requirement is less, then there is no cost for the fertilizers and pesticides. So your cost of cultivation is brought down so much that the cultivation becomes profitable. And in addition to that, by not adding chemicals, see, normally the fertilizer use efficiency is only about 40%. Or maximum in certain cases 50%. So what happens to the rest of the fertilizer you apply? That pollutes the water, that pollutes the air, that pollutes the soil, and our health is adversely affected. So there are people still using the indigenous communities, indigenous seeds without any fertilizers and pesticides, giving the ecosystem service which is needs to be recognized. And there are systems already existing in the Government of India, and even globally there are systems where carbon credits and ecosystem services are possible, and which we need to take it forward By using the indigenous seeds, we can take by reviving the indigenous seed systems. It is not just making one variety popular, but we should establish the seed system at the state level so that the seeds, quality seeds, are accessible to the farmers who want to cultivate them, and in that way we will be saving our environment, and we will be tackling the climate change issues, and then we will be breathing a fresh air without chemicals, and then we will be saving our earth from high temperatures by because of the climate change. We can bring down these climate change adverse impacts by using the indigenous seeds. Thank you very much.